Great start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday, the 3rd of November, Planning Application Committee meeting here at Surrey Heath Borough Council. Welcome to anybody that is watching us on our YouTube channel, and welcome to the members of the audience that are here. Before we move to apologies, could we have the fire instructions, please?
Thank you. We aren't expecting a fire alarm tonight, so if you do hear a loud, continuous ringing sound, please can you exit the doors and just follow the officers down the stairs and out towards the ground floor area outside the Knoll Road multi-storey car park. There is a fire escape to my right. Please only use that as a last resort. Do not stop to gather any personal belongings, and please do not use the lift. Once you're at the assembly point, please wait there until you've been told you can leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have any apologies for absence, please?
We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Noble and Councillor Whitcroft. Councillor Deach is substituting for Councillor Hawkins, and Councillor Rise is substituting for Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. Members, are you happy for me to sign the planning application minutes of the 6th of, was it 6th of October? 6th of October. Thank you. So with no further ado, if I could hand over, please, to Melissa for planning application for Solstrand Station Road Bagshot.
Good evening, councillors. So the proposed application before us this evening seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing dwelling and all associated buildings and structures, and the erection of 3 detached 3-bedroom dwellings with associated car parking, refuse storage and collection point and landscaping. As outlined in the updated report, this application was reported to committee on the 4th of August with an offer recommendation of approval. The recommendation was voted upon and lost. However, members could not provide defensible reasons for refusing the application, so the application was deferred on the grounds of drainage. This presentation will go through the application as a reminder, and the main discussion will be around the drainage proposal. Take note of the updates as I go through the slides. So the application site is located within the settlement area of Bagshot, and then this is the location plan, just to remind everyone, also outlined in red. And then a couple of the site photos. So the first one's the front image is the existing dwelling, and then views towards the rear of the existing dwelling, and then the third picture's view towards the rear of the site. So this is the site plan that shows the replacement dwelling to the front of the site, which is plot 1, the access road down the western boundary, and the 2 dwellings to the rear. Also includes the turning head, the waste collection point, and the parking for the 3 units. So then just a reminder of what the dwelling to the front of the site, plot 1, will look like. So included is the elevations, the floor plans showing the 3 bedrooms, and then the view of the street scene. And then this is the elevations again and floor plans for plot 2. This is one that includes the attached garage, and then plot 3, again the elevations and floor plans. So overall, members are reminded that while at the meeting in August, members indicated a preference for refusing the application based on the character and design, highways and amenity impact. However, following discussions on the night, it was considered that the reasons given were not defendable at appeal. Since then, there's been no material changes to the site or to planning policy, and the reasons given would remain undefendable at appeal. Members are requested upfront information to be submitted to satisfy the concerns over the drainage on the site. I'd therefore ask members to focus on the drainage scheme before you this evening. The rest of the presentation will go through the submitted drainage details. The Council's drainage officers work closely with the applicant to reach a design solution that is acceptable and complies with national policy and the core strategy requirements. The drainage scheme needs to be assessed against the national policy and the core strategy. So the NPPF section 17 addresses flooding. The application site is not located within flood zone 2 or 3 or over 1 hectare, and therefore a flood risk assessment has not been required. The proposal includes a sustainable drainage system to reduce surface water on the site and to mitigate any potential increase in surface water flooding. Policy CP27 of the core strategy sets out developments are required to be climate change residual, in particular reducing the risk from all types of flooding. And policy DM10 sets out developments will be expected to reduce the volume and rate of surface water runoff through a sustainable drainage system. The PPG sets out that design flood events for surface water as a 1 in 100 year event. Therefore, to comply with the national policy and core strategy, the drainage strategy needs to withstand a 1 in 100 year plus 40% climate change event. The updated report provides the full details of the strategy. I'll therefore provide a summary of the main points. The foul water for plot 1 will reuse the existing connection, and plots 2 and 3 will pump up to the existing connection at the top of the site. The surface water, following site investigations due to the ground conditions and the national rail land located to the south of the site, the most suitable drainage system is to have a pump system. This will include chambers, hydro brake, turning head that is capable of holding excess water should a flood event occur. The proposal is to discharge water into the existing Thames Water surface water sewage under the highway within Station Road located to the top of the site. Plots 2 and 3 surface water will be pumped to the top of the site. The drainage strategy has been designed to accommodate a 1 in 100 year plus 40% climate flood event. Further, the design has gone above this and will withstand a 1 in 200 year plus 70% climate change event. If these events were to occur, the excess water would be stored within oversized pipework, manhole chambers, and a permeable subbase within the turning head in front of plot 2. As outlined, policy CP27 of the core strategy states development should be the climate change residual, in particular reducing the risk from all types of flooding and improving water quality. It's therefore officers' view that the proposal complies with the national policy and the core strategy requirements, as it has been designed to withstand a 1 in 200 year plus 70% climate change event, which is above the NPPF requirements. The drainage strategy has been secured by the recommendation of Condition 18 set out in the updated report. To safeguard the proposal, a maintenance plan has been provided. This will include the maintenance would be carried out by a specialist management company organised by the managing agent. The maintenance schedule would be carried out in accordance with the manufacturing recommendations, and further safeguards including the future residents will be provided with a 24-hour contact details to the specialist company should the managing agent not be contactable. If the pump should fail, there will be a warning system to alert occupiers or the managing agent. The system has been designed, should the pump fail, the storage of excess water will be provided for an event of 1 in 30 years plus 10% climate change event. Above this, surface water will collect within the turning head. Condition 19 secures further details of the maintenance, a verification report to be carried out to demonstrate that the drainage scheme has been constructed as per the agreed Condition 18. The submitted information will also need to include details of the managing company and state the national grid references for any key drainage elements. This additional information has been considered reasonable to require prior to occupation of the development. Beyond the on-site strategy, the drainage engineer did consider in the event that excess water from the site went above the threshold limits of the strategy could potentially cause a greater increase in flooding off-site and a financial contribution required to undertake the improvement works. However, this event of flooding that could occur is at a very low risk. It's the officer's view that the proposed design complies with the NPPF Section 17 and the core strategy CP2 as outlined above. Further, policy DM10 states the council would expect development to reduce the volume and rate of surface water runoff through the incorporation of appropriately designed surface drainage system at the level appropriate to the scale of development. The level of detail provided within this strategy meets the policy requirements and is appropriate to the scale of the development, which is a net increase of 2 dwellings. The LFFA have also confirmed that the requirements for the financial contribution aren't proven. There is a viable proposed drainage strategy in place that is suitable proposal to mitigate for the possible pump failure. The strategy for the development is not reliant on the off-site works to meet the requirements of the NPPF. Lastly, the financial contribution to secure the off-site works would have been required through a legal agreement or a Grampian condition. It's the Office's opinion that for the reasons outlined in the updated report, this would not meet the test for imposing a condition or a legal agreement. Further, the strategy is policy compliant and the level of detail provided is appropriate for the scale of development. Overall, the drainage strategy is considered to comply with the national policy, the core strategy, and the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Melissa. This application met, I understand, the threshold for residents to speak on the application, but that unfortunately that application wasn't received in time. But I understand that their local councillor is going to read a letter on their behalf. Before doing so, could you please just confirm that these are the words of the residents and not your own words, please, Councillor White? After that, we'll move to questions.
Yes, thank you. I can confirm that these are not my words. I am reading them out and I still have an open mind. I have two objections. I will read them as quickly as I can and hope that they're still readable, listenable, I mean. Right. First of all, our residents would like to thank the drainage engineer, Wayne Purden, for visiting the site and taking the time to walk around with them and acknowledge that there was a problem immediately below the site. Right, this is from the resident. Having reviewed the surface water and drainage strategy, we are objecting to the planning application for Solstrand for the following reasons. In general, any plan which is predicted on pumping sewage and effluent up a hill using multiple pumps and holding areas is not a good plan, as it is fraught with difficulties and opportunities for things to go wrong. This would result in the potential for effluent to mix with surface water, causing a potential health issue, along with the associated smells and discharge next to the floodplain. The developer has made it clear in the proposal that they will not be held responsible for their own plan by passing accountability to other parties. However, the overly cramped and overdeveloped proposal for this site leaves the developers little choice other than to come up with such a desperate proposal or to scale back the application to one house rather than three, satisfying the requirements of all the objectors. The application that has been submitted requires the excess water to go directly into the property of the Elms. The owner of the Elms has formally stated that they will not support this plan and will not provide access. In the information pack for the meeting on the 3rd of November, page 10, section, I've got to work that out, 16, I think. It states that the Surrey Heath Borough Council drainage engineer has requested a financial contribution of £6,000 for Surrey Heath to undertake flood improvement works. These works would improve the flow of water by diverting exceedance flows south of the site to an existing culvert and would upgrade the connection discharge, including enlarged pipework downstream beneath Wardle Close. The plans submitted do not show any routes over the neighbouring properties to get to the existing culvert, which is essential to the plan being acceptable. In what can only be considered as an attempt to rush the proposal back to the committee, the Surrey Heath Borough Council Planning Office has dismissed her colleagues' three potential arguments for refusal because the Surrey Heath Borough Council drainage engineer failed to fully cost or explain how the money would be spent, and this imprecision is unreasonable. Instead, the Surrey Heath Borough Council drainage engineer should be given the time to provide this information rather than bringing back to Planning Committee incomplete. I hereby formally request that this is fully reviewed by the Head of Planning, as it seems wholly inappropriate. In regards to the proposed surface water drainage, The strategy says it is proposed to discharge surface water from all areas into the existing Thames Water Service water sewer. This will be via an unattenuated discharge rate of 5.1 I/S subject to agreement by Thames Water. It would obviously be better to have that agreement from Thames Water ahead of permission being granted. Otherwise, the entire basis of the planning application is not valid if Thames Water does not agree. Previous planning application meeting, there was a majority of councillors voted against this development. It was made clear that the surrounding neighbours of Solstrand do not support the application in its current form of 3 two-storey buildings. The cumulative effect of privacy, lack of fire engine access, exit at the point of traffic calming measure, light scale dominance over development and drainage should be considered in the round. The next one is shorter, I promise. And this is from one of the other neighbours, Sarah Osborne. I would like to register an objection to the most recent drainage plan supplied for the proposed Solstrand development. The plans clearly show an intent to channel surface water directly into my property. I have a working allotment at the bottom of the garden which would be destroyed by flooding. I would not be consenting to work through my property due to the damage this would cause, and there are no details on the plan about this increased risk of flooding would be mitigated. The entire development is plagued with issues, all of which have been recorded and discussed at length, so I won't repeat them here. Despite a councillor majority voting against the development at the last meeting, there appears to be a motivation to ignore these concerns around flooding, accessibility, parking, noise and privacy. There is an acknowledgement in the planning officer's report that neighbours will be left having to bring the inevitable civil suits, which feels like a dereliction of duty to local residents at best. The developers also announced in the last meeting that they were given the go-ahead for the backland development of Solstrand before official plans were submitted. This clearly goes against the Surrey plan, as there is no housing stock shortage in Bagshot. This, in addition to the planning officer report referencing houses on a different street which cannot be seen from Station Road as justification for a development which is clearly out of character to all neighbouring properties. I would very much like to understand why there is such a clear push to steamroller this development through when it fails on so many counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask the officer to respond to any of the points that were made there, and before we move on to the debate, I forgot to ask, are there any declarations of interest on this property? Councillor White and Councillor Gordon.
Only that I've had conversations with the residents.
Thank you. Melissa.
The only things I would say that those neighbour objections I have already seen and read, and the update covers those objections, so they've been summarised within the update, and officer comments are put next to those. So unless there's any specific ones you'd like me to expand on, those points are covered within the update. Those two objections that you read out, I've already seen them. And I've covered all those points that have been raised within those objections within the update that you've been provided with this evening. So I don't know if there's any specific points within that you'd like me to expand on, or you're happy that they've been addressed within the update. Yeah.
The only query I have is that the resident says that you're going to go through her land, and on the update you say they're not. Who is right?
There is no proposal to go through that rear corner of the property. That's not the case. That's not the proposed route that's been put forward.
And the other query was about permission from Thames Water. I think the update says you don't need it.
Yeah, it's not something we'd commonly ask for prior during the application stage, and it would be subject to a further application for the applicants to submit once planning permission has been granted.
Thank you, Melissa. Do any other members have any questions? Councillor Deach.
Thank you. So there were actually some very specific things within there, and you say that you've addressed them in the report. Let me ask you in a slightly different way. Are you satisfied that every single point that Councillor White has just raised then are mitigated within the drainage officer's report, and that you know these particular points that were raised, you know, are taken care of?
I would say that, yeah, I'm pretty sure most of them will be addressed either within the update, the officer's report. I don't know if there's any specific ones that you're particularly concerned.
I'm actually not particularly concerned about any of them, but these residents are. You know, it's our responsibility to make sure that residents' concerns are addressed, and you know, they've been read out there, very some very specific points, and what you've basically said is that, well, they're addressed in the report.
Yeah, I'm saying they're addressed within the particularly within the update, because they're specific comments back to the objections that have been received. So I'm quite happy that they have been addressed.
Right.
Councillor Gordon.
One of the points raised by the residents was the overflow water. So the plan and the reports and the update doesn't specifically say where the water goes to. So the water appears to go from the back of Solstrand into Hartdean. And having read the plans, there's nowhere at all that's been picked up yet so far. So if there's heavy water, like we had recently, heavy rainfall, at the bottom when it comes in the garden there, there's nowhere for it to go. Looking at the plans in detail, it would go down, the pipe basically needs to go down the path by the train line, which is to walk down. And the only option left is basically through the elms. But the resident, Sarah, has made it quite clear that it can't go by the elms or onto Hartdean Court. So there's a 2-metre gap from the Solstrand to Hartdean Court. So there's no runoff at all. If you look at the plans in detail, where the pipe would go to, that's where the logo is. So you can't see clearly on the plans any part of the pipe there. So I think the residents are really concerned that they feel that their mitigation so far hasn't been met at all. So I know you said it's been dealt with, but can you please expand for their sake where the water went to go to? Because there's no clarification in the report of where the surface water should run to and how it will do it. And the report from our officer and theirs doesn't answer that question. So
those points you're referring to are the exceedant flow. So that is if the pump system did fail, that is the exceedant flow between the plots 2 and 3 and down to that southern part of the site. The likelihood of that occurring is very minimal, and that's for the reason why we're not asking for the financial contribution, and that the drainage strategy put forward does comply with the NPPF.
Thank you, Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding the Thames Water access, and this is more of a point of clarification. If Thames Water does not provide permission for access, what then happens to the development? Because obviously the drainage strategy is dependent on it gaining access to the Thames Water sewage pipe under highways. If that then is not accessed, does that then prevent this development happening even if permission is being granted?
It's a separate consent from Thames Water, so they have to satisfy the consents from Thames Water as well. So if they can't satisfy those rights which fall out of the planning system, yes, they can't proceed with the development. It's part and parcel of it.
Thank you, Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. When we looked at this in August, my concern was that the drainage engineer had explained that the drainage scheme they had in mind would require the consent of the neighbours to implement. And we heard evidence from the neighbours they would not give that consent. And I struggled to see how to approve such an application with such a condition when we'd heard evidence that condition could not be met, would not be rational. It would fail the test of rationality. Have things changed in that respect since August?
Yeah, so the drainage engineer has worked hard with the applicant to reach a design solution on the site. So I think the original thought didn't come forward and a new drainage system's been put forward. So it is solely within the ownership of Solstrand and wouldn't require any the off-site works in any neighbouring properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Black, I mean, just for your reference, on page 10 of the report, there's an off-site infrastructure works, which outlines why we're not going off-site and why the strategy, which has been put forward by officers and supported by Surrey County Council on this, it's within the site and the scope of the site only. So that strategy covers all that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor White and then Councillor Gordon.
This is my question this time. Is it usual that you try to pump affluents and surface water uphill when the natural way for it is to go down? Why are we trying so hard to pump it uphill?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the first for the system to pump in that way, but because of the groundwater and that you've got the national rail is less than 20 metres from the site, the pumping system is required. So in this case, it's the most suitable drainage system for the site is to have a pumping system.
Just on that point as well, if I refer to page 4 of the update, you've got a summary of the lead local flood authority's response there. And the first bullet point says, the use of pump systems to manage surface water is less desirable than gravity discharge as a means of surface water disposal. However, it is commonly used, and with the appropriate safeguards, maintenance regime and backups, it can function well.
Councillor Gordon.
It's not really a material consideration, but just more of a general question, really. This is a bad development. The village doesn't want it. The residents definitely don't want it. The council voted against it last time. It's not required. We've hit our housing supply. In the report, anyway, it's already implied that residents will have to take out civil suits against the developer for issues they foresee. Why do we keep thrusting? And it feels very, very forced, this development. It feels we keep having to take more and more and more bad developments that we just allowing common sense for a second that just aren't right for the area. We have more and more of these all the time. I know it's not material consideration. I appreciate we work in a certain framework, and I get that one. I'm just expressing a general concern for the residents and the people we represent to elect us. Don't want this in the village at all. They've made it abundantly clear, and it feels like we're being forced to take this development again and again and again. We've hit our housing numbers. There's no need for it. Just making that point for the record, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Obviously, I was here in August, and I think it was fair that universally none of us were in support of the application as it stood. However, we are all completely aware that we can only object to an application on good planning grounds. I have a couple of questions myself, and the other thing as well, that within today's application hearing, we can only object to it on flooding grounds because the other grounds were not put forward at the previous meeting. I have a couple of questions. In terms of the maintenance agreement, we have said that until that first occupation won't occur until after the maintenance agreement is agreed. My personal view on that is that we shouldn't be starting the application until we have an approved maintenance agreement. And I wondered whether or not it was possible to update that point. And the second point is that within your updates, actually the one update that hasn't been covered, unless I've missed it, for which I apologise, because I've only read them this evening, is that there will be no access required into neighbours' ground. And that actually isn't in the updates. So could we please have absolute clarity on that point? And also, is it reasonable to amend the agreement to say that development should not start until a maintenance agreement for the pump and the ownership of that maintenance agreement is secured? Because essentially, if that fails, all of the neighbours are potentially in the mire. Thank you.
The elements that are left to agree on the maintenance agreement, I think it would be unreasonable to require up front for them to, for the developer to sign up to a managing agent prior to starting development works. I think would be unreasonable. That'd be the sort of thing they'd be looking at later on, and the verification report will need to be done once the drainage scheme was in place. So for that reason, I still think it's reasonable to have it prior to occupation. And just want to clarify, what do you mean by no access onto neighbouring land for the drainage element or during the whole construction of the site?
Certainly for the drainage element, but I would have thought for the whole construction of the site, because the neighbours have very clearly said that they will not permit access, and the 2-foot gap has also, in between one pipe and the other, that was mentioned by one of the other members, I don't think has also been covered. So if you could come back on those 2 points, please, Melissa.
So they don't need to carry out any works within neighbouring land. However, I don't think I can categorically say they won't need to go onto neighbouring land property, say, for some parts of the construction, but that would all be agreed within party wall agreements, that if they needed to do that and if the landowners aren't going to agree to that, then they'll become civil issues. It would fall under the planning remit for those elements.
I'm sorry, I can't remember who raised the point, but thank you, Mark, but my understanding is that within the scheme, there is a requirement at one point to go across somebody else's land within the drainage scheme. Was that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But the residents have made it quite categorically clear that's not going to, no permission available. My question was based on what you just said about the construction plan. The construction plan, you said, might require access to neighbouring land, and they've made it abundantly clear there'll be no permission granted whatsoever at all. They're massively against this proposal. So you just said in a second there'll be cause for civil procedures. So could you please clarify that? Because the residents obviously are here now, and they've made it very, very clear there's no way at all they're going to confirm to any part of this at all. So for absolute clarity, are you saying then they have no choice in this matter? They will be constructed on their land?
My understanding is that it will come under the Party Wall Act, which means that one has to be reasonable in order to permit construction if construction is permitted. But actually going through somebody's land with a pipe, my understanding is that the owner of that land can refuse that. So if the drainage plan requires it to go through at any point someone else's land, I just would like clarification as to whether or not that drainage plan can stand up.
So, Chair, can I come back again? I think Councillor Black raised this in his questioning. Page 10 of the actual main agenda report states about the off-site infrastructure works, and that's not needed for this development because all the actual drainage works which have been proposed is actually within the actual site. If we were looking for an off-site infrastructure, which we're not doing in this case here, then we'd have to go on third-party land, but that's not needed. So everything which is being proposed by the applicant is within the site itself.
Councillor Black.
Okay, does that mean that, so technically all the work is within the site, all the work that this application has to approve is within the site, well, am I hearing it correctly, reading between the lines correctly, but it will require a connection to an adjacent site, which the owners of that adjacent site we have heard evidence, would refuse. We break that down. Question 1, does it require a connection to an adjacent site?
So I come back to the point again, which I've raised with you previously. That is not being proposed as part of this application. Everything which is being proposed is within the site, and the applicant has formulated a strategy to actually make the application work within the actual site. There's no requirement for an external pipe to go into a third-party land. That's not being proposed as part of this application.
So there's a misunderstanding somewhere else within the room that there is a need for such a thing. Is that correct?
So what I'm saying to you, there is no need for any infrastructure to be off-site. It's all within the scheme itself. I think it's worth probably for clarification, if you could bring up the plan on the screen to show members the actual strategy which is being proposed, Melissa.
Sorry, when we've got it up, can we also look at it just to confirm that where it needs to access the Thames water, there is no need for that link to go through anybody else's land as well?
There you go. It's quite a detailed plan, so I've got it zoomed quite far in. So that's the connection that will be made up the top here into the Thames water, outside of the application site and not within any neighbouring properties either. And then you can see that all the drainage being proposed is solely within the application site.
And where's the elms on that map, please?
So they're this neighbouring property along here. So their
Can we
garden
just
runs.
zoom in to see that there is no requirement at all to channel surface water directly onto that property?
Yep, so that's that bottom corner of the site there. So there's no pipe work being proposed
Oh, okay,
down
right.
there.
Okay. I'm just reading the resident's objection letter again. It says channel surface water directly onto my property.
Yeah, so they're going to channel the water between plots 2 and 3 and down to the southern eastern part of their site, so it won't be into that neighbouring property. Again, that's if the worst case scenario, if the pump system failed, but the maintenance plan has been put forward to mitigate for that.
Right. So the plan you're presenting wouldn't require the consent of the elms, as far as you understand?
No, it wouldn't.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if this is a planning issue or not, but looking at this, I assume this is going to be 3 separate freeholds plots. Who is actually going to own the approach road and turning head? Because the owner of that is surely the ultimate liable for this system, because it's going to run underneath it.
So it'll be jointly owned by them, and the managing company will be responsible for that as well. So the future occupiers will likely pay like a service charge, which would maintain that road.
So they are liable for it, but they could, if they opted out, they just have to take the consequences. I'm trying to think of liabilities. I mean, you're in danger of getting into deeds on properties and covenants. That would be outside the planning system. It would be part of the purchasing process, and that would all be part of the deeds and covenants.
Councillor Gordon, and then I think we'll have a summing up and a
Sorry,
vote.
there's still some ambiguity here. So the residents, when they met with the drainage engineer, were implied that there would be connecting pipe, which you said so far there wouldn't be on the plans. Now, the plans are quite technical. Is there any way at all the residents who met with the engineer could make a comment on the plans at all while they're here now? As it's quite in the technical nature so far, just to kind of explain they're saying the plans don't represent the adequate what they were told. So if the plans are possibly incorrect, I don't want to prove something that's going to be incorrect. So they were here, they met the engineer. Is there any way at all we could get them to make a point of clarity?
Thank you for the question. My understanding is that the officer has looked at those, at the planned details, and we are having assurance that at no point does there need to be any connection across residents' property.
I think is what you're referring to is the off-site works that have been suggested, but we consider them not reasonable as part of this application, and those works may be considered at a later date by the council as a wider project. So for this application, it's not being considered, and all the works that make this drainage scheme policy compliant are on site.
The water at the bottom of the garden. So because it runs downwards, will the pump be sufficient enough to support all the surface water from the bottom of the corner of the garden back up the hill? Is that what you're saying? So.
No, so that's the excess water flow should the pump system fail, or there was an event over a 1 in 200 year event that the excess water would flood into all the pump systems, the turning head, and then should that be exceeded, it would flow down between plots 2 and 3 into the rear corner of the site. But the likelihood of that happening is very small.
Thank you. We have an officer's recommendation for approval. I have to confess that I am disappointed that we are being guided towards it being unreasonable for that management agreement to be in place before construction starts, because I think there is a risk that we will be faced with a fait accompli, i.e. the building is there, the drainage is there, but actually the pumping system isn't going to work. But as it stands at the moment, we have an officer recommendation for approval. Do we have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Rise and Councillor Betton. All those in favour?
So all those in favour, that's Councillor Barnett, Councillor Betton, Councillor Black, Councillor Deitch, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Perry, Councillor Ratteram, Councillor Tapper, Councillor Rise. And Councillor Wheeler, apologies.
And those against?
That's Councillor Gordon and Councillor White.
Thank you. Therefore, the planning application is approved. Thank you very much to the residents that are here. And please do bear in mind, I don't think that the application, we had no reasons for refusing it, I think is the long and short of it. But thank you for attending and thank you for your time. Thank you. We'll now move on to the application for 17 Junction Road. Melissa, is this you again? Thank you.
So the application site is 17 Junction Road in Lightwater. The proposed application seeks planning permission. Actually, I'm sorry, wrong one. The proposed application seeks permission for a retrospective raised patio. The application site is located within Lightwater and the surrounding area is residential. The raised patio extends from the rear elevation of the host dwelling and has a height of 0.3 metres. Due to the slight land level changes on the site, this height increases to 0.5. There are steps leading down to a grassed area. To the side elevations is area of flower beds for planting. The retaining walls are finished in white render and the patio is in grey slabs. So the raised patio is located towards the rear of the dwelling and therefore results in limited visual impact from the public vantage points. The design and materials used reflect the finishing materials of the host dwelling, and overall the the raised patio would not result in harm to the character of the area. So these are just two pictures there that you can see the patio has been built and constructed. So these are photos towards the neighbour at number 15, which is to the south of the site. The boundary treatment with this neighbour is close-boarded fencing. This neighbour is set further forward in the plot such that the rear elevation is set behind the host dwelling and the raised patio. This neighbour has a single-storey outbuilding located on the boundary, which you can see in this image up here. This provides a level of screening which restricts views back towards this neighbour's rear elevation. This neighbour has also written in support of the proposal that the raised patio has not resulted in any obtrusive noise or loss of privacy. And then these are images towards the neighbour at number 19. So you've got the image all the way down the garden and then to viewing their boundary. The boundary treatment with this neighbour is hedging. From the officer's site visit, it was noted that the hedging has been trimmed on the application side, which has reduced the thickness. This neighbour has a single-storey projection adjacent to the common boundary, which has a similar depth to the raised patio. So you can slightly see sort of brickwork through the hedging here, and it's got a similar depth to where the raised patio finishes. This neighbour has a patio area adjacent to the common boundary. I might actually just go back. So you can see this is the neighbour here I'm talking about. So they've got a flank wall and they've got a patio area just after that. The existing boundary treatment provides a level of screening. While there may be views through the hedging, this is limited and the raised patio would not provide any additional overlooking compared to the existing garden area. Therefore, the raised patio has not significantly increased the level of overlooking or resulted in loss of privacy to this neighbour's garden and is not materially different to the previous situation or the lowered grass area. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Melissa. This application would normally have been determined under delegated authority. However, it was called in by Councillor White. So I'm going to give Councillor Galliford. Is Councillor Galliford online to comment on this? No. Okay, do any members have any questions relating to this application? Okay, this application is recommended for approval. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Rise and Councillor Deach. All those in favour?
That's Councillor Alloway, Councillor Barnett, Councillor Besson, Councillor Black, Councillor Deach, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Perry, Councillor Rasharam, Councillor Tapper, Councillor Rise and Councillor White and Councillor Wheeler. So that's unanimous.
Thank you. I believe that brings us to the end of this evening's planning meeting. So thank you all very much indeed.